In my last episode, I talked all about why it is that you are still struggling with self trust in your life. First and foremost, we broke down what it means to trust yourself. And the definition that I used is that self trust is knowing that whatever happens, you will remain with yourself, which is just so huge. We've heard a lot about self trust over the years. And I guarantee that, you are the person who's read the books, who's done the things, who wanted to have this and has had it in one way or another. I'm sure there's an area of your life where you're like, man, I always know, like, I know what to do in these situations. You might be really savvy and clear when you're at work, but then when you get home or you're dealing with relationships, you're like, oh my gosh, I don't even know how to navigate this. Like, I feel so weak, right? And we beat ourselves up and we think that there's something wrong with us, and there's just not. And so, if you haven't checked out the last episode, I highly recommend doing so before diving into this one so that you have a really nice foundation of understanding around what self trust is, first and foremost, but then also have the opportunity to really build up a storage of reasons why it is that you still struggle with it so that you can have compassion and grace for yourself in the midst of this journey. Because as I shared in the last episode, there are endless reasons to not trust ourselves. And unfortunately, there's so many agendas on this planet that don't want us trusting ourselves, and they're not going anywhere. And so it is our responsibility to, first and foremost, again, understand what self trust is, then find some compassion for ourselves. And in today's episode, if you've been thinking, like, okay, great, now I understand it, but how do I change it? That's what we're diving into. And we're going to be talking about some really practical, rooted ways that you can build self trust, not just from a place of like, oh, take this action, do this thing, but truly allowing this information to settle within your system so that you can return to it if you need to, but ultimately, so that you start becoming more aware in your life. Because there are things that you may be doing in your everyday that you don't even realize that are breaking down your ability to trust yourself. And so we're going to like look at those things and we're going to flip those things around. And today's episode is just really going to be incredible. And I can't wait to share it with you. So if you are brand new, welcome, welcome. My name is Anna Hendricks. I'm a spiritual guide, teacher, podcaster for over 6 years. I work within higher dimensional frameworks of wisdom, specifically the Akashic Records, that allow people to see their lives with greater clarity, context, and understanding so that they can heal, fall in love with themselves, and ultimately return to who they are. So if you are interested in any kind of self development, healing, which for me, healing, it just means returning to who you are, the Akashic Records, spirituality, any of these things, make sure that you are subscribed because so much goodness here. All right. So let's kind of dive in first and foremost, right? And, I think like kind of the thesis to today's episode is that self trust is built through evidence, right? You cannot think your way into self trust. You have to experience your way into it. And the way I spoke about this in the previous episode was the difference between living through our head and living through our heart, which is a much bigger concept for another day. But this is just one of the ways in which we are showing up in our everyday. Are we trying to move through life from an intellectual place, or are we moving through life from a heart-centered place? And especially when we're talking about this self and developing that relationship with self, then we are talking about moving through life from a heart-centered place versus an intellectual. Our mind is an incredible tool, and it's something that we want to be aware of. We want to work with. We also want to keep it in the back seat. We want to be leading life through our heart space, right? And so today we're definitely going to be talking about, again, how to begin developing self-trust. So first and foremost, I want you to kind of take a step back and I want you to think about how you learn how to trust someone else, right? When you're in a brand new relationship, maybe you meet someone and you're like, oh, they're so cool. Like, I want them in my life. Oh my gosh. and you have like a kismet moment, right? And you go home and you're like, oh my gosh, I met the coolest person and we're going to become friends and we're going to blah, 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 right? Maybe that's just me. Anyway, this happens. And I'm not just talking about romance. I'm talking about like friends or like a business acquaintance or just anyone in general, like relationships, right? That sort of initial whatever is just the initial whatever, those fireworks, if you will. But then ultimately the relationship becomes about, can I trust this person? And it's these things that start popping up, right? Like they say they'll call you. Do they call you? They say they'll meet you at this time. Do they meet you at this time? They say, oh, hey, I'm going to introduce you to this person. Do they follow through on that? Right. And ultimately, it is those actions that lead us to either seeing that we can trust someone or that we can't trust someone, right? If their actions and their words match, then we begin to feel safe with them. We begin to feel like, okay, I can trust myself with this person. I can trust myself to be open, to be vulnerable. As an autistic person, I can tell you that this is like such a core part of how I show up in relationships and what I'm looking for immediately in relationship. And ultimately, that tells me everything I need to know about a person. Because while I can have, surface level relationships or just like, oh, hey, what's up? I really want a real relationship if I'm opening myself up to someone. And so immediately I am paying attention to, do their words match their actions? And if they don't, that is information for me to then make a decision, right? But ultimately, we are looking for evidence. We are looking for evidence to determine whether or not we can trust someone else. Now, I want you to flip that mirror around, right? Because now it's time to look at the evidence that you have been giving yourself. And I encourage you to do this from an objective perspective, to not be shameful or feel guilty or any of those things, right? What happens when you need rest and yet you force yourself to keep going? What happens when you tell yourself they're going to set a boundary with someone that you don't? What happens when your body tells you something's wrong, but you ignore it, you override it? Or you receive an intuitive hit about someone, and yet you decide it's not right. Every single action in that regard begins to break down the trust within you. Ultimately, it is creating evidence for you. You are teaching yourself that no matter what happens, when something happens, you may not listen to yourself. And I want you to really take a moment to think about this, okay? We're all guilty of this in one way or another. Again, that's why it's so important to look at this within ourselves, from an objective perspective and just be like, okay, how many times have you said you're going to start that diet or that workout, or that you're going to have that tough conversation with a parent or your child or someone else, and then you don't follow through? You give yourself an excuse and you're just like, no, 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 right? Or you ignore the things that are happening in your body, or you're ignoring the intuitive hits that you get about someone. It's so amazing to me because, as an intuitive, like, and a very strong intuitive, I have hits immediately about people. And especially when I was younger, I would ignore them all the time. I'd be like, no, 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 that can't be right. No, no, no. Because a lot of times it was just like, you can't trust this person. Oh, this is, like I would say they're kind of maybe more negative, and I would want to be like, no, no, this is a good person. This is a nice person. I didn't really know how to deal with my ability to see straight through people. But I learned again and again, right? Again, through evidence. But I could flip that around on myself. And I am absolutely someone who, my body is like, my brain's starting to get tired and it needs food. And I'm like, no, 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 you're fine. We'll push through this. We have to understand that every time we do, we are, again, creating evidence within ourselves, right? And we're teaching ourselves, when it matters, I may not listen to me. We're letting ourselves know that, like, I don't really know if I trust myself. So, of course, why would you trust yourself? Right. And again, it's not about shaming yourself for every time that you've abandoned yourself, which is ultimately what you're doing. It's about understanding that trust has to be built. And it can also be eroded through experience. Okay. And if experience helps to erode your self trust, then you can rebuild it. All right. And this brings me to my third point, which is why information, like more information, isn't the answer, right? Because the whole point is that you can have all this information about what is going on. In fact, going back to like the example I was just using, when I was younger, I would get all of these intuitive hits about people. And I'd be like, no, 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 everything's fine. And or people around me would be like, oh, they're so great. Or this is such a big one. When I first, really stepped into the new age metaphysical spiritual community, there were all these really popular teachers, gurus, whatever, that people loved. And I would try to open myself up to them, but it was just like, I can't. Like it just didn't feel good. It didn't. And I got ridiculed. I got bullied. I really dealt with some judgment towards me in regards to these people. And so again, I would like try to take these people in, but I just straight up couldn't. And years down the road, the Epstein files, oh my gosh, so many things that have been coming out over this past year. It's been like ping, ping, ping. Oh, this is why I couldn't trust this person. This is why I knew this about this person. This is why, you know what I'm saying? It's like all of this evidence. And it compiles up for me in regards to like, oh, yes, I can trust myself. Oh, yes, I can trust myself. Right. And I've done a lot of work around this because of the work that I do. But my point just being, it's like all of the information in the world still isn't going to help us. We have to learn. Self trust is built through evidence, it's built through experience, it's built through access. Remember, like we talked about, you have to walk through what it is. You have to learn through your own experience, right? Self trust is really built in the small moments. And I think that this is so important because when we think about self trust, I feel like a lot of times, especially when I'm speaking with my clients, the way that they view self trust is like, or building self trust is they're going to make these big decisions. They're going to take these big leaps of faith. They're going to quit their job or they're going to, travel to the other side of the world or whatever. And that's fine. But ultimately, self trust is really built in the small moments and in the really tiny moments, right? So you can begin building self-trust by just being like tuning into your body. Hey, what do you want to eat right now? Instead of, no, you should eat this right now, right? Oh, do you want to go out tonight? Oh, okay. Instead of, oh, you must because you said you would, right? Like asking yourself these questions, really paying attention to, am I tired? And honoring that if you're tired. The thing is that very similarly to building a relationship with someone else and really determining for yourself whether or not you can trust someone else, you're doing the same thing with yourself. And it goes back to those small moments again when they're like, I'm going to call you, or I'm going to introduce you, or I'm going to do this thing for you. And then if they don't, you're just like, okay, you notice that, right? It's the same thing with yourself. And so you can just start like, hey, I said I would go to bed by 8. I'm going to go to bed by 8, right? Or my body feels tired. I'm going to honor that. Or my body is hungry. Okay, I'm going to stop right here and I'm going to honor that. It's truly those little moments that really begin to build self-trust within you, right? But you must be listening to yourself. You must be present. And I think that is kind of the real sort of struggle in this endeavor, because we're all going super speed through our life. We're all trying to multitask and talk to this person and do this thing. And Again, I'm super guilty of this. So no shame here. But when we aren't present with ourselves, then of course we can't meet our needs. And so we abandon ourselves again and again and again, thinking like, no, I'm fine. I'm good. I'm good. I got to do this thing, like super focused on a project. And so like, oh, I don't need to eat. I don't need to rest. I don't need to take a break. I'm good. I'm good. I'm good. Right. And then when you get to the other side of it and you're feeling all burnt out and you're like, why am I burnt out? Oh, gee, I don't understand. Because you didn't take a break, because you didn't eat, because you didn't, you know what I'm saying? You weren't listening. And listening is such a big part of it. And so if you want to start building self-trust, you've got to start listening to the smaller things, listening, asking yourself questions, right? And paying attention to the smaller things. And this is like, if you really struggle with tuning into yourself, then you can just begin following through on the things that you're telling yourself, right? Again, like I said, I would go to bed by 8. I'm going to get in bed at 8, even if I'm like wide awake, right? I'll take a book or I'll do something while I'm in bed. But I said I'm going to go to bed at 8. So I'm going to go to bed at 8, right? And I have to tell you that this is something that I see so much with clients and have even noticed within myself that really begins to degrade your relationship with yourself. We don't realize how crucial it is that we follow through with what we say. And this is very much, honestly, like a big issue within our modern society at large. I was just having a conversation with a friend about this the other day. I am someone that if I say, hey, let's go get lunch or let's jump on a call, I mean it. And I follow through on that. But I have noticed throughout my life that the majority of people will just say it to say it. They don't actually mean it. You know how many times that I've had someone tell me that they were going to have me introduce me to someone or invite me to something and that was it. And then they didn't follow through. These are things that erode other people's ability to trust in us. And so when we do that to ourselves, the same thing happens. And I want to ask you, like just take a moment to think about like, okay, how do you feel when someone says they're going to do something and they don't actually do it? How does that make you feel? I know it doesn't make me feel good. It doesn't make me feel good at all. And as someone who's like super sharp with pattern recognition and sees everything, it's just like, oh man, like, great. Now I'm not going to be able to trust you. That sucks. And yet I do the same thing to myself when I say like, okay, tomorrow I'm going to do this, but then I don't follow through with it. And you've been there. You get that kind of like sick feeling in your stomach, or at least I do, because ultimately it means just as much to me to follow through on what I say I'm going to do as to others. And so I keep bringing others into this because if you're someone who struggles to take care of yourself, then maybe you can kind of switch around that perspective so that it kind of motivates you more. Because ultimately, the harm that is being done when someone doesn't follow through for you is the same harm that you are enacting upon yourself when you don't follow through on you. And that is really important to think about. Number 5, as you're building self-trust, you need evidence that you can survive being wrong. This is very important because ultimately, as humans, we're the ones who place these labels upon like, oh, this is good or this is bad. The universe doesn't do that. The soul doesn't even do that. In fact, the soul is kind of like, cool, with every experience, whether it is hand quotations good or hand quotations bad, it doesn't matter. It's just an experience. And ultimately, that's the reality of it. It's not good or bad. It just is. Now, what are you going to do with that, right? So in the midst of thinking about building self-trust and even going back to my original definition, right? Self-trust is knowing that whatever happens, you will remain with yourself. And so you need to begin actively compiling evidence and paying attention to your ability to pick yourself up and to keep going, even if you made, a, hand quotations, bad decision, right? let's say you move to another city. And I've actually, this is an example that I saw with one of my Akashic clients a couple years back. They had moved to a brand new city. It was a big move for a job. They were so excited about this job and so excited to move. And it was a really huge endeavor. It took a lot for this to happen. And, they found an apartment and they moved in and these types of things. And then they were laid off not long after. And they didn't have any family in that area. They didn't have any friends in that area. They didn't like, it was a real like, oh my gosh, I didn't listen to myself. I made the wrong decision. I beat myself up, beat myself up. Right. And the Akasha really, like, we were in their records, the Akasha really showed them like, hey, this job wasn't the job. It was a stepping stone. It was meant to get you here. It was meant for you to take the action because the job that's actually for you wasn't available at that time. And it wasn't within, I believe, just a few weeks of this reading that this person messaged me, was like, Anna, I got the job and this job is way better, blah, 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 blah. Right? How amazing. How amazing. She had no problem. She listened to herself perfectly, right? And of course, yeah, she went through like a scary situation, but that was beautiful evidence for her that even in the midst of being, hand quotations, wrong, as she thought originally, she wasn't wrong. She wasn't wrong at all. And that's the whole thing. Our like beating ourselves up over our decision making, we overlook the lesson or the opportunity or the experience that we're meant to go through in that moment. And so, what is important for you is to start really building evidence around thinking about the times in life where maybe you made a decision that wasn't, again, right, hand quotations, correct, and maybe had a difficult outcome, but inevitably led to something even better. Or, again, built self trust because you learned that even in the midst of a difficult time, you could trust in yourself because you stayed with yourself, right? I can make a decision that doesn't work out and still trust myself afterwards, right? So maybe you choose a relationship, it doesn't work. You launch something, it flops, you follow guidance, but you feel like it's misunderstood, whatever the case may be. If you are constantly beating yourself and being like, see, I can't trust myself. See, I can't trust myself. First and foremost, if that is what you believe, the mind is going to give you more and more evidence of that. And so I want you to be really, really, really careful with that belief, even that idea. In fact, I want you to kick that out the freaking door as soon as you become aware of having that. Okay. Because there is no room for that in the mind, because the mind only knows what you tell it. And if that is what you are saying to yourself, right? If you're allowing that, you will receive more evidence of that, right? Instead, you've got to learn how to say to yourself, like, I made the best decision I could at the time. I learned something, I adjusted, I chose something, right? I'm still here. Ultimately, every challenge just makes us that much more resilient, that much more capable of doing wilder, bigger, more expansive, more exciting things, right? You don't need to require yourself to be perfect in order to be trustworthy. In fact, you have to remember you're human, you're fallible. You're going to make so many decisions that you're going to consider to be poor. You're going to do those things. And so I would suggest to really begin building up evidence for yourself. And you can like create a list in your note app. These are things that I do for myself that just help me to remember, like, no, I've got me. Okay. And even if I make a decision, I've got me, right? When I decided to leave North Carolina, break up from my last relationship, I wanted to go out west. I've been wanting to move back out west here in the United States for a very, very long time. But my ex-boyfriend didn't want to. And so it was just like me kind of, waiting, if you will. And so when I broke up with him, immediately I was like, okay, I want to move back out west. I had lived in Colorado before. And so I just kind of said, like, all right, I want to go to Colorado. I'll just start there. But I didn't know where I wanted to move within Colorado. I didn't, the obvious places didn't feel right. And then someone suggested to me Colorado Springs. And I did a little bit of research on it online, kind of looked it over. It's a sizable city. And I was like, cool, I'm going to go to Colorado Springs. Beautiful. I moved to Colorado Springs. I didn't visit or anything. Came out, moved to Colorado Springs. And pretty quickly, I was like, this place is weird. This energy is weird. I don't like it, actually. I really, really don't like it. And, I had been living in the mountains in like the boonies, like there was nothing happening where I was living before. There was like barely any people. It was nothing, like the one coffee shop I think closed at like 3 p.m. every day. Like it was, so but I realized in the midst of moving to Colorado Springs, like, I don't want to be in a big city again. Like, I've done big cities, I've lived in huge cities all over the world. I'm done. I'm done with big cities. And I really don't like the traffic and I don't like the noise. And I don't, you know what I'm saying? And I honestly kind of went through this moment of like, oh my gosh, now I'm going to have to make another move because if you've listened to my story, I've moved, I think at that point, like 8, 9 times since the fall of 2022. So I was pretty bummed out. I was pretty upset. But lo and behold, I met my current partner. And my current partner is like some kind of unicorn. We met at a Christmas party. And I knew not long into that relationship, it was like, oh, this is why I came here. This is why we have to learn that, like, hey, we're going to be okay no matter what decisions that we make. And we're always going to find our way out of it, Whether or not I had met him, of course I could have, like, I had already been, I mean, I'm telling you, like, I think 4 or 5 months into being in Colorado Springs, I was looking at other places to move. So that was going to happen no matter what. But ultimately, I did the right thing by going to the Springs because I met someone that I'm meant to be in relationship with right now, right? So it was all good. Number 6, self-trust is also built through repair. Okay. And I think this adds something really special to the mix because once again, when we think about relationships in general, right, with other people, and I feel like because consciousness has risen enough in regards to being able to have a beautiful relationship. And again, this is romantic, this is friendship, this is business, this is any relationship. Ultimately, this is how I view things and pretty much how I always have. The quality of a relationship is your ability to repair in the midst of differences and issues. And you know what I'm saying? Because as someone who can truly get along with anyone, I know that it's actually the people that I know I can fight with, that I can argue with, that I can have really big disagreements with. And like, we're going to be okay because we're going to still be able to talk to each other and respect each other. And we're not going to get mean when we fight, or we're not going to, you know what I'm saying? Like, we can move through tough times together. That builds safety in a relationship and it builds trust. And it is the same thing to yourself with yourself, right? So if you're someone who's like, well, I've made like millions of promises to myself and broken them, and I trust myself, that is okay. Because your relationship with yourself, your ability to trust yourself is not built through perfection, right? I just got that word kind of mixed up in my head. It's honestly built through repair. How are you able to pick yourself back up? Like if you do make a decision that you really get down on yourself for, first and foremost, like, why do you get down on yourself? Why? What is the point in that? The Akashic records have talked endlessly about how shame and guilt and these sorts of emotions are just a total waste of time. All they do is put off the good parts in life. And ultimately, like, they're just feeding in that yuckiness, that like deprecation, that victimization, that sort of like, oh, why did I do that? Like, oh my gosh, as a third line in human design, you always hear me talking about my first line, but my third line, we literally learn and live through failure. That's why I have jumped off so many cliffs, why I have remade myself so many times. I have made many, 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 many mistakes in my life. And years back, I remember reading a quote from an entrepreneur, and I'm going to blank on her name right now, but she founded Spanx, which, if you're a woman, you know what that company is. And she said that growing up in her family, her father taught her that failure is just trying. And I loved that. I loved that because it meant she's engaged, it meant she's trying, she's showing up. And literally at their dinner table, her father would ask, okay, so what did you fail at today? What did you can you think about the amount of resilience that she built? Like, what an incredible thing to grow up with. Someone asking you, like, okay, how'd you fail today? In like an excited way, like, oh my gosh, what did you do? Because ultimately it just means you're trying. And like, we have all of this fear around trying, about being wrong, and what if you could just break that? What if you could find compassion for yourself in these moments, and just say, like, okay, so I didn't show up to that situation correct. I didn't handle that thing the way I wanted to. I didn't say that well. And I'm sorry. And I'm going to do better next time. And you just keep going. Like, hey, this is just a part of life. This is just a part of figuring it out. Because the more that you can do this with yourself, the easier it's going to be for you again to build that self-trust, because you're going to know, like, hey, even if I make a decision that I don't really like, I'm going to be good. And I'm not going to like waste time beating myself up. I'm not going to like do all these terrible things to myself. I'm just going to continue, right? We leave ourselves sometimes in life and we screw things up sometimes in life. And that's okay. We can always turn things back around. Years ago, I really focused on being able to kind of make a bit of a mess of myself online. Up until that point in time, I had always wanted to show up and really say things right, and really do the hand quotations right thing. And I was realizing how much this was really keeping me small and preventing me from being myself, because I'm a Sagittarius. I'm like a foot and mouth girl. Like, I'm autistic. I am so direct with what I say that it really takes people aback. And, I have offended people endlessly throughout my life. But the thing I realized was, like, okay, I can just be me. And if I hurt someone's feelings, I can say sorry. If I say something that's not true, I can say sorry. I can just say sorry. I don't need to be perfect. I don't need to make myself be a version of myself that isn't me. And that again was with the outside world. And so flip that around on yourself, right? Because the truth is like, if there's someone in your life and you love them and they mess up, like, you're going to forgive them. You're not going to beat them up. And you've got to do the same thing for yourself, right? Ultimately, this is just an important part of developing that relationship with ourselves, is our ability to be like, okay, I messed it up. Not a big deal. We take ourselves so seriously when it comes to life. We take ourselves so seriously when it comes to our spirituality. We take ourselves so seriously that we we remove the fun out of the situations that we are experiencing in our everyday life, and we put this pressure on ourselves to be right. And if we can release that, we are going to be able to make decisions and to trust, okay, this came up, I'm just going to go with it. Okay, this feels right, I'm just going to go with it. Okay, you know what I'm saying? The greatest tool for building self-trust as well are the Akashic records. And of course, in the midst of right now, as we're ramping up to my 10-week deep dive Akashic record intensive course, Access Your Akashic Soul, I want you to really think about this, because learning how to work with the Akashic Records, if you feel drawn to them, is going to fundamentally shift the way that you are able to trust yourself, because it's going to be evidence after evidence after evidence after evidence of seeing the information flow through you, of seeing it be aligned, of seeing it be correct, of having the experience of it yourself. It is mind blowing. And I can tell you that when I began working with the Akashic Records back in 2020, and over the years of working with the Akashic Records, I have become so much more self-efficient. I have deepened my self-trust in such a huge way. And it ultimately goes back to the relationship that I've built with the Akashic Records, i.e., built with myself, built with the access that is within me. Because not only have I seen endless evidence for the ways to make decisions or the things that I feel or whatever the case may be, but then also in the midst of these like hand quotations bad decisions that I've made, the Akasha has shown me the grace. The Akasha has shown me how those things have served me, and they have helped me to change my perception around what self-trust is and around what, so-called bad decisions actually are. There aren't any bad decisions. Like, there truly aren't. And I know you can think about really extreme circumstances, right? Maybe like being in a violent relationship, really horrific things happening to you, maybe like a business partner stealing all of this money from you, or whatever the case may be. But you have to understand, again, from the soul perspective, these experiences aren't filed under good or bad. They're filed under what is. We are the ones who attach meaning and story and judgment to them. And ultimately, that is why we continue like struggling with ourselves and the relationship with ourselves, is because we are constantly judging ourselves instead of, right? Oh, I thought I believed this. Hey, I thought that, we're meant to move through life in a very different, much lighter type of way. And when you work within the Akashic Records, you begin to understand that because of what you see and experience again and again and again and again and again. And it just blows your mind. I mean, I have students who have phenomenal relationships with the Akashic Records, who've been working with them for years and are still like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that, like, I can't believe that this is what came through the Akasha. I can't believe, like, like I knew this and then it showed up, and it's incredible, right? But it kind of always comes back to like, well, yeah, weren't you trusting yourself in this situation? Well, yeah, you had the intuitive hit before. Now do you feel validated, right? Experiencing yourself through the Akashic Records really deepens your ability to trust yourself. So I kind of want to leave you with just one simple exercise, and that is I want you to start collecting evidence, okay? And I want you to literally make a note on your phone or whatever is best for you. And I want you to title it Evidence That I Can Trust Myself. And I want you to start really following through on like adding to this list. Maybe you can even set a reminder on your phone at the end of the day to think like, okay, were there any moments throughout the day that I trusted myself, that I really followed through with maybe what my body was telling me or what my intuition was telling me, or maybe, in the midst of making a decision. And I want you just to really start writing those down, right? And this could look anything like, I knew I needed rest, so I took the afternoon off. I didn't want to go, so I said no. I wanted to ask someone else's opinion, but instead I made the decision myself. I changed my mind. I followed an intuitive nudge. I made the wrong decision and I figured out what to do next anyway, right? This can look like so many things, but I just want you to, especially if you are really struggling with self-trust, to start making this a part of your everyday, because I guarantee that now that you have listened to these last two episodes and you understand what self-trust is, you understand why it is you struggle, and you also understand how you can build self-trust in very practical ways, that you can begin doing that for yourself right now, because it's going to be in your awareness. It's going to be front of mind. And it's not going to be like you're working with this sort of esoteric type topic, right? We've heard about self-trust for years, but being able to really understand it and allow it to sink in, that's like two different things, right? There's one thing to know it intellectually, there's another thing to embody it in the heart. And ultimately, that's really what we want to do. So, just to kind of sum things up, I want to bring things back to the relationship analogy, right? You wouldn't expect someone else to just trust you because you've spent a couple of hours with them, right? You want to show them that they can trust you if this is something that's important to you, because it's not to everyone, which is crazy to me, but that's just the truth. If you are trying to show someone that they can trust you, you're going to put in the time, you're going to put in the action, you're going to follow through on what you say. You are going to make them a priority. And it's time for you to do that for yourself, right? Because we want to shift you into a place where you say, like, I know myself. I listen to myself. I rely on myself. And even if I get it wrong, I know I can figure out what will come next. Ultimately, right? Going back to our definition, self-trust is knowing that whatever happens, you will remain with yourself. You've got you. You've got you. Nothing can come between the relationship with you and yourself. So I hope that you have enjoyed today's episode. I hope that this served you. And I would love to have you come join Access Your Akashic Soul. We're kicking off November 5th. And I have such an amazing bonus for folks who join via the wait list. So make sure to join the wait list if you are interested in learning more about that. All things are getting set up right now. It's really freaking cool. This third cohort in my year 3. What? I can't wait. All right. Sending you so much love. Thank you for being here. Make sure to share this with a friend. And don't forget, when we invest in ourselves, the world benefits. Till next time.